Hi and welcome to the Active Code podcast, brought to you by Aspire Active Partnerships. I'm Paul Griffiths, and joining me each week on the pod is Luke Johnson.
Aspire Active Partnerships is a community of like-minded business leaders who all believe that collaboration in the sports coaching and children's activity sector is essential for success. We've proven that working in collaboration does benefit business growth and essentially helps more children be more active more often.
To combat physical inactivity, we need organisations that are performing at their very best. Organisations will only operate to high standards if they are led well. So, if we can focus on developing high quality leaders throughout an organisation, not just at the top, customers will experience higher quality services, which means heightened enjoyment levels and increased levels of physical activity. And if we do this at an early age, we know that we can build the foundations for a more active, happier and healthier life. The Active Code investigates what it really takes to be a successful leader and how organisations can combat physical inactivity.
We won't be alone through this journey. We are joined by business owners and experts from our sector, as well as inspirational people from outside our industry. We'll understand the importance of physical activity to our guests, reflect on leadership experiences, and gain thought-provoking insights on how we can crack the Active Code and get more children more active more often. If you like what you hear, please leave us a rating and subscribe wherever you get your pods.
During this episode, we've got Chris Sharman joining us, who co-founded Topodium Group in 2020 with a single mission to transform the sport and health and wellbeing industries by leveraging a powerful set of collaborative solutions and industry expertise from sports marketing and technology to youth consultancy and business growth. During the pod, Chris speaks to us about the challenges of rolling out a service on a global scale, how Topodium put emphasis on a family feel organisation even through rapid growth, the vision of making people feel good inside and out, and the importance of selling the why and the feeling through marketing messages. Enjoy the pod.
Welcome to the Active Code podcast.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
It's brilliant to have you with us. And as we do with every episode, would you be able to tell our listeners a bit more about your journey so far?
Yeah, so I guess my journey started when I was 15. My mum said, you've got to go out and earn some money. You've got to do some work, and got me a job interview at the local leisure centre, doing kids' birthday parties, which I had no interest in doing whatsoever. I wanted to be a sports journalist growing up, and the last thing I wanted to do was jump up and down on a bouncy castle with kids, but that was what it was. Did the interview, got the job, and I have to say I've probably never looked back. I've been in that sector, in that world, since I was 15, so 27 odd years now. I started in leisure centres. I went into health clubs. My first full-time job was a family activities manager at a health club, and ran the creche, the nursery, the holiday camps. I worked in leisure centres, did lifeguarding, holiday camps, etc., etc. Did a lot of sports coaching, and carried on all the way through. So ended up going through management development programs, ran and managed leisure centres, health clubs, and then went into much more strategic programming roles. So I did a lot of work in football franchising. I specialised a lot on product and program development for leisure trusts, and then ultimately went back to the health club chain that I started my first job at, a Sporter, some may so remember that name, and was their families director. And I then got promoted to head up fitness, racket, swimming, health and beauty, and all of their ancillary products, before we sold out to Virgin Active. So in 2010, I used that opportunity to set up my own consultancy business, focusing on children's activities, children's sport, children's and families fitness. And that's really been the last 12 years of my life. I've specialised a lot in the last 5 or 6 years on branding and marketing, and Topodium Group, as the business that I now run, is a combination of the product and training and development business that I set up in 2010, along with marketing, merchandise, and now technology. So, yeah, I started at age 15 and I've never looked back.
Where did that passion come from, Chris, to get into that space? Obviously, you said your mum said you've got to get out there and get a job, but where's that? The passion you still have? You've been in the sector for a very long time. So yeah, where's that passion come from?
I think I never expected to enjoy it. It was almost like I've got to go and do kids' birthday parties and so on. I just loved doing it. And I think the passion came from the enjoyment that I had. It never felt like work. I got paid to jump up and down and play with, football and bouncy castles and swimming pools and so on and so forth. So I think the enjoyment came from seeing the enjoyment that you could pass on to others in the activities that you were delivering. And whether that's now I'm less involved actively delivering sessions, but I'm now training up coaches. That's a big part of what I do, and developing programs that teachers and coaches go out and deliver to children. I get the secondary impact of that because they are now getting those benefits that I had when I first started, in terms of the enjoyment the kids are getting, the energy that's coming off of those children and young people that are taking part in the programs that I'm now creating.
So you've still got that motivation, that enjoyment, even though you're kind of a step removed from the children or the young people taking part.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I try and keep my hands in and still get involved in delivery where I can. Just don't have the time as much anymore. I think the motivation comes now from not just training up and developing people that are hands-on with children and young people, but it's also the development of a team now. And I really enjoy managing, the people that sit within my business, because they are passionate as I am and was in that space.
And if someone says the words physical activity to you, Chris, what does that mean to you personally, would you say?
I think for me personally, it's around feeling good and looking good. I think a lot of people look at it in that respect. It's about being healthy on the inside and the outside. And yeah, I don't see it any more than that. Everyone has a view on physical activity. Some people are switched off by the word fitness. Some people love the word fitness. Some people switched off by physical activity and prefer sport. But you wrap it all up, it's the same kind of thing. It's getting moving and being healthy. So I think for me, feeling good, looking good, both on the inside and the outside.
And how do you keep active, Chris? At the moment, he's obviously a busy man, and his physical activity is still important in your everyday life.
Yeah, I play a lot of tennis. Tennis is the sport that I'm involved in. I took it up really just after COVID. I played football previous to that. But yeah, I will play tennis 3, 4, 5 times a week. Really enjoy it. I like the social side of it. And from my fitness background, I still do classes and I run a lot. So I think classes, running, and tennis will be the 3 things that I enjoy the most. And I guess the new thing that I've properly got into recently is paddle. And although it's not so prominent over in the UK, whenever I'm abroad, I'm lucky enough to travel a bit with what I do. Paddle is the first place that I will jump on a court where I can.
Paddle's a great series. It's the first person that we've interviewed that has mentioned the word paddle tennis. I started playing paddle tennis about 2 years ago. It's a brilliant sport.
Oh,
really
phenomenal.
And not known by many people. It's kind of like when you say paddle, people are like, what the hell's that? And you showed them a video on YouTube or something, typically of like a pro, and they go, wow, that looks amazing. So I'm not quite at that level, but it's brilliant, isn't it? It's a really good sport.
Yeah, I think if you were to fast forward 2 years in this country, there will be paddle courts everywhere. The same's happened in Denmark. It's been massive, obviously, in Spain and parts of Europe for a long time. So, yeah, watch this space. Paddle is going to be the upcoming thing.
Yeah, we'll get a game going. We have to. Yeah. We'll introduce.
100%.
We just need an extra player. So if there's anyone listening that wants to join in, we'll get
there's a couple of people in my team that do it. So Charlotte on my team, she loves paddle. So there you are. I've got my doubles partner.
Perfect. Physical activity. So when you do manage to get out on the courts or you've done a fitness class, what are the kind of knock-on benefits for you in your work life, would you say?
I use physical activity to switch off, to relax, which sounds like a really strange thing sometimes because people see it as a chore and they see it as something that's hard work. I see physical activity as the complete opposite. I guess the prime example, I came back from holiday last week and I spent a week at Club La Santa in Lanzarote, which is a sport and physical activity holiday. And a lot of people think I'm mad because that's a holiday. But for me, getting up, going running, going and doing a class, playing sport, having that challenge for me is the perfect way of switching off. I love playing tennis in the evening when I'm working over here, on the basis that I'm properly switched into trying to win. That competitive part of me enables me to not have to worry about the good, bad, or indifferent day that I've just had. I can properly switch off. And I think I've always been lucky that sport, physical activity, and also my dog, taking him for a walk in the evening, is the perfect opportunity for me to switch off. So I see sport and physical activities. Yes, I understand the benefits of it, but for me personally, it's that perfect opportunity to close out a day or start a day, and set my thoughts, go out for a run, kind of clear my head and be ready for the day.
Like you said, being kind of happy inside and out, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you mentioned kind of sport and physical activity are very similar. In your role or from your experience, how have you promoted physical activity to other people, especially young people, but those that aren't engaged necessarily in a sport?
I think the key piece when we are promoting physical activity to kids, young people, and indeed adults as well, is it being fun. I think that word is sometimes forgotten, particularly when it's connected to fitness. People don't connect that word fitness with fun. They connect fitness with sweating, hard work. It's a chore. I have to do it if I want to lose weight. It's all the negative side of physical activity. So I think when I'm developing products and programs, the number one thing, yes, obviously it's got to be safe, is it's got to be fun. If it's not fun, why would we do it? And I think that's one of the key things around getting inactive people active. If you can create something that's fun and engaging and it doesn't feel like sport or fitness, that's the way of getting more people engaged.
And Chris, you mentioned at the in your intro at the start around that product program development, and you just touched on it again there. Would you just share a bit more information for listeners on what is it that you have done in the past, why you're doing that, and the importance of innovation for activity engagement?
Yeah, so let me wind back to how I got involved in it, really, because, programming or product development was probably not something that was that common, 15, 20 years ago when I started in the sector. But I ran a leisure centre out in Oxfordshire, and I developed what I thought was a good standardised children's birthday party product, a football programme, for after schools, and a number of physical activity, fitness kind of classes for children and young people. I then was lucky enough to be offered the job to take on a second leisure centre and run another one out in the Cotswolds. So I oversaw the two. And all I did was literally drop everything that I'd created in one and put it into the other. So it was very simple to market. It was very simple to train. I could swap staff between the two because it was only a 20-minute drive between them. And I think the penny dropped for me then that actually standardized approaches to things were not common at that point in time. Everyone was kind of doing their own thing. This was before Les Mills and standardized fitness classes were a thing. Everyone was a freestyle instructor. They created their own concepts. They did their own classes. They created their own routines. All I was looking to do was kind of create standardization that enabled us to scale. That leisure trust that I was working for at that time had 18 sites. And I very quickly went into a role around developing good quality, fun and engaging programs that were consistent. So it didn't make a difference whether you were in a site in Wickham, a leisure centre in Oxford, or a dual site facility with a school out in the Cotswolds. The end product that a child or indeed an adult was getting was consistent. And I think that probably was the starting point for me going, how do we keep iterating that? How do we keep creating now for the big chains like the David Lloyds, the big coaching companies that are out there, to go, what have you got that is standardized, that you can say is one of the core things that you deliver and you do well, as opposed to just letting people go and deliver what they want to do, which is what I did as a kid. I say kid, when I was first in the sector. Here's 50 kids and a whole load of footballs. Go and do what you want. And I think that's great if you can think on the spot and you're creative. But if you're not and you haven't got a plan to follow, the end result could be all sorts of difference, for kids. Therefore, the experience drops, the quality drops, and then ultimately, commercially, you haven't got a product that anyone's coming to.
Yeah, like, and quite clearly as well, the fun element is crucial on that. So standardization, I think a lot of people, I completely agree and understand what you're saying, but some people may look at standardized programs as, probably not as fun as it would be as if what I used to do, and here's a rough lesson plan you can follow and kind of a bit of freestyle coaching, off you go. But actually, if the standardization is done correctly, then it will be fun, and as a result, you're going to get more engagement in those activities, aren't you?
Yeah, I think what you've got in the sector is a lot of people that are very good at working with kids, but they're not necessarily creative at coming up with good ideas to engage those kids in physical activity. So if you're giving them a framework to work within, and I completely agree, sometimes you don't want it too prescriptive because there are some great coaches out there that have got creativity that can go off piste and use a framework and work within it, as opposed to, right, I've got 5 minutes of doing this activity and then I've got 10 minutes of doing this one. No, read the room, understand what's working, what isn't, and adapt as you need to. So I think there is that balance of prescription, working within, a framework, and then also the ability to encourage good quality coaches and practitioners to take that activity, that game, that class on a journey based on the audience that they're working with.
What challenges have you faced, Chris, of that? Because sounds great, and I'm sure you've had successes. But what are the challenges when it comes to kind of rolling that framework out across, initially at the time through the leisure sector? What challenges were you coming up against at that point?
I think when I first started, it was quite a new concept. A standardized approach. What am I buying? Can't we do that? And there was this. Well, we'll just do that. We've got the ability to do that. And I think the birth of products and programs like Les Mills or Zumba, where there is a framework, there is a structure, there is a license connected to it, and so on and so forth. All of a sudden, that became on trend. So therefore, those questions weren't being answered. Oh, it's just like Les Mills for kids. Well, a little bit, but think of that as a structure, think of that as a framework, and think of that as how you can make sure that a team of 100 staff are consistently delivering something that is good quality that you are putting your name to, ultimately. Nowadays, because there's so many options out there of products and programs to buy into, it's about, what makes your one different to what else is out there, and how do you keep iterating it to be one step ahead? So gone are the days where you can go, right, here's a product that I wrote 3 years ago, go and deliver it. No, this is a product that we wrote 3 years ago that every 6 months is being updated, or every 3 months is being updated with new equipment, new innovation, and all the pieces that kind of sit with that.
And what does make a good program, Chris?
I think it depends who you're selling it to and who wants it. Because some people want a product that doesn't need a lot of equipment, that's very easy to set up, that can be carried in a bag and dropped in a school or taken to a leisure centre, or 5 minutes later be, in the park with a whole group of kids, or a village hall, or whatever it might be. Whereas you've got others that go, I want the bells and whistles, I've got a fixed facility, I want it to look great, I want technology, I want flashing lights, I want sound, I want music, and I want, everything. So I think it very much depends on the audience. But for me, fundamentally, if it's fun, fundamentally, if it has progression, and the stickability factor, kids all want to keep coming back to it. Why do they keep coming back to it? Because it's challenging, it's fun, it's engaging, it's social. There's an element of competition. There is this amount of learning that they are progressing. I think if you can tick a number of those boxes, that's what good looks like. And then you've just got to mold it to the end person that's buying into that program, in terms of, is it mobile, whack it in a bag, take it off with you, or is it fixed to fill a facility like some of the boutique gyms have got a class that fills a room and that's the only thing that they do in their room.
Yeah. It's quite interesting, Chris. We many guests on here that we talk about which is often overlooked, is the importance of listening to your customers and really knowing your customers. So there's lots of programs that have come and gone over the past 20 years that clearly haven't done that. So what you say there is again a really valid point with regards to just listening to what your customers need. Don't assume that your customers need the flashing lights and the music and loads of equipment, or don't assume that they're only going to deliver this in one space. We've really got to get deep on the conversations with our customers, haven't we, to get a real good understanding for what they want.
Yeah, and there's two levels of customers. There's the leisure trust that's buying into a product or program to train their staff, and there is the kids that are coming to it. And how often are we actually asking the kids, do you like it? What do you want to see? We developed a circuit program for 8 to 14-year-olds that's rolling out at the moment. And, what a David Lloyd wants when they are putting that out is very different to what the end child wants. Can we have a football version of it? And can we use this bit of equipment more? And so there's two levels of listening, and you've got to do both, because if you just listen to a leisure trust or a health club chain or whatever it might be, you're not actually getting the end user that ultimately is going to be paying for that product at the end of the day. And I think, I've worked with people before that go, I want this product. And what they're doing is they're buying a product that would work for their child. So they work in a role within a chain of leisure centres, health clubs, whatever it might be. And they've got one idea of what a good product looks like. And that's typically based on the children that they have that they take to physical activity. My daughter would love that product. Great. What about the other 100 people that come to that, that after school program or come to your leisure centre or whatever it might, would they like it? Or are you just building a product or just buying into a product that is suited to the child that you know and that you have a connection with?
Chris, from the parties initially through to the football franchise and the brand and the marketing, all the support you offer, who would you say is the most inspirational leader you've worked with, and why?
For me, I've worked with some great people, but the person that gave me my first full-time job was probably the person I probably set the tone for how I became a manager myself and how I led people. So it was a health club chain. It was my first full-time job, and it was a family activities manager position. And at the time, there wasn't many facilities within that chain, and all the family activity managers were female. And I was interviewed for it. I had plenty of experience through parties, camps, lifeguarding, coaching within the local leisure centre. But the directive to the GM came from Central that said, no, because there's a creche involved and because it's childcare as well. I don't think a male, and this was back in the 90s where those conversations unfortunately did happen. And, guys are much more involved in children's activities now than they ever were. She was told that she couldn't recruit me, and that feedback was passed on. But then something happened, and ultimately she, and I found this out in later years, she went, actually, no, I don't care what you say. This person is right for the job, and I will, follow my gut. I will be confident in the decision that I want to make. And she went against that rule. Never told me that until way later on. But it was a really interesting way, when I had that later conversation with her, when I was going through the management development program within that facility, that chain, to understand that sometimes standing your ground, following your gut, being confident in your own decision is crucial. And there were other things that I picked up from her. She had time for everyone. She was a great listener, and I think an out of the box thinker, way before thinking outside the box was even a phrase that was kind of talked around. That there was always a way of improving something. There was always a way of doing something differently. I think she is someone that I've always looked up to, and I think set me off with the way that I've done things from that point forwards.
Amazing. So yeah, confident, having time for people, being a great listener. Are any of those traits things that you've tried to kind of replicate in your own journey, would you say?
Yeah, I would class myself as a listener massively. I think when I am working with people, and also when I'm selling, and promoting what I do and what the business does, listening is a key attribute. I call it social selling. I'm not commodity selling to you. I'm not trying to give you a product that I think you need. I'm going to listen to what your pain points are. I'm going to understand what solutions you are looking for, and I'm going to see if I've got one that fills that. And I think with my team, I would say I'm the same thing. I want to listen. I want to understand. I want to understand what pain points they've got, so that I can try and find solutions and make their work life better. Ultimately,
we call it the doctor approach, listening to the customer rather than the car salesman approach, where you just spit benefits at the customer as soon as they walk through the door.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's what you think. Yeah, listening for you is really important. If we put a survey out to your colleagues or people you lead about your leadership style, what do you think they would say?
I think I've always been known for being quite visionary, coming up with very much the creative ideas. I think that's just the world that I've kind of worked in, with kids' activities and needing to be creative and being thrown curveballs and coming up with solutions at a spare of a moment. So yeah, I think I would be seen as someone that is an ideas person, is visionary. I think that's ultimately why I've ended up being an entrepreneur, because I think they are the key attributes of someone that has the confidence to set up their own business, and so from there, that's kind of where I think that they would be at.
And how important is development for you, Chris, as developing your own leadership skills?
I think huge. I think, for me, I've been managing people for 25 plus years. But I'm always coming across different types of people, new situations. And I think the best thing and I enjoy listening to podcasts, speaking to other people that, run businesses and so on, and just absorbing their experiences and learning from that. So for me, I very much a fan of kind of just understanding how other people do things, because if I can take a little nugget of gold from someone and another nugget of gold from somewhere else, and I can adopt that to make myself and my team ultimately better, then I'm very open to that. It's kind of how I think everyone should be.
And off the top of your head, is there something, an example you can give us on that you're working on at the moment to enhance your leadership skills?
I think for me, what I'm working on at the moment is being more process driven. I think our team is growing, and in growing the team, I am now having to let go of more of what I've historically done. My consultancy business for a number of years was just me. I brought freelancers in, so everything was in my head. As we've grown and developed the team, and I've got great people that are responsible and ultimately accountable for different parts of the business, I have to take what's out of my head and give it to them in a way that they understand it and they can implement it or they can operationalize it. So not for the first time, but I'm really conscious now of making sure that I'm more process driven. So when I come up with an idea and I just go and run with it, I'm now documenting how I do it, because appreciating not everyone else has that creative mindset that maybe I do, and that confidence just to blag my way through things, which I think a lot of entrepreneurs have that trait. Some people want structure, some people want process, and some people will develop and will run with that. So consciously, I know being more process driven is something that is a focus for me.
Yeah, and having processes within your organisations, there's a huge asset, isn't it? It's so important. And like you say, so there's probably moments where anyone who's doing a regular task or activity, and they think, actually, I do need to delegate this, or I do need to process map it out so someone else can take it on. I think there's always those moments of, well, I know I need to do it, but it's actually quicker if I just keep doing it myself, and I'd eventually get around to doing it. Before you know it, 12 months has passed and you're still doing a task that you probably shouldn't be doing.
Yeah,
because
completely agree.
Easier to complete it. So yeah, any tips on getting over that would be welcome.
I think sometimes it's just the acceptance that you can't do everything. And, for me, if you're bringing good people into a business, let them do what you brought them in to do. And even though it might take longer, even though it might not be how you would do it, the only way you're going to move the business forwards, the only way you're going to get growth and traction within what you're doing is if you release some of those things and let the experts that you brought in to do them just crack on and do them. And I think, it's hard to let go, particularly when it's your business, when it's your baby ultimately. And I think that's probably the hardest hurdle I've overcome over the years is letting go of stuff. You can't do everything. You've got to look at the bigger picture. And in order to get that traction, in order to develop, move forwards, grow, you've got to let people crack on. Otherwise, why bring them into your business?
Yeah, and there's nothing better for me anyway for empowering people and watching those people take those tasks on and fly with them, and quite often way better than what you could ever have done anyway.
Absolutely, a different pair of eyes looking at doing something. You go, actually, I never thought about doing it that way because just always did it the way that I always did it. So yeah, no, completely agree. Let people get on and do those things because that's what they want to do. They want that responsibility. They want that ownership. Give them the process, map it out, and also give them the freedom to adapt it. So it's not too rigid that they can't put their own stamp on it as well.
Yeah. If we stay on like the people development side of things, if you like, you mentioned earlier part of your role and the organisation that you currently have is not only developing programs and services, but also developing workforce.
Mm-hmm.
So many organisations that we talk to in the sector, workforce is probably the number one headache at the moment in terms of people and in terms of recruitment and retention. And the great resignation that we hear of in the media that is apparently going on. But it's quite obvious when I say that workforce is essential for our sector. And the importance of, if we look at the end product, i.e. engaging more children in physical activity experiences, not only do we need a workforce, we need a workforce that is highly skilled, equipped, has the knowledge, the confidence, the skills, shows the right behaviours, etc. Can you share some of your experiences over maybe post-COVID with regards to where you see the workforce is at the moment and where we need to get it to?
I think since COVID, we've seen a big drop off of people wanting to or coming into the sector, and we've got this big mix now of abilities, of passion, and of technical abilities to work in the sector. And from working with a lot of coaching companies, working with a lot of trusts and leisure centres and health club chains and so on and so forth, attrition of staff is their biggest issue right now. The churn that people are going through is ridiculous. That said, I think there are some great examples of people doing it well that are not growing too big. They're keeping a team within, let's call it, a family size, 30, 40, 50, 100 people that they focus on. And we know it's not the most paid sector, out there. But if people are enjoying what they're doing, if they are motivated, they are encouraged, they are given support, training, development, then they will stick around. But some of the bigger organizations struggle because that individual is just a number. I was working with a coaching company before the summer, and the owner knew everyone's name. I mean, there were 70 odd people on a training course. He knew everyone's name. He made an effort to go and see everyone, to understand what they did, where they were. He knew simple things like, their partner, were they married? Did they have, kids? Did they have a dog? Those types of things. And, I worked with a really great sports coaching company in America that felt like a family, even though there were several hundred people, because the owners, the senior team just cared. And I think just caring really makes a massive difference. And that sometimes you don't get in a corporate environment where even the senior management are just seen as a number. So I think the ones that I've seen operate best are the smaller, privately run businesses that care about the staff, and therefore the attrition is better. The people want to work there, and yes, decent pay, yes, decent benefits, yes, decent training. I was talking to a company yesterday. The importance of just having a good uniform, and when someone turns up, they've got what they need to go and coach in. And I was working with them on what that looks like, and it's like, yeah, we want to give them this, but we can't afford that. But we know it's really important, and if we can spend another £100 on making their experience when they join us better, because they've got this welcome box with this uniform and a nice water bottle and a nice bag and these things. They feel part of something. And, that was a really interesting conversation around, maybe we can't pay £15 an hour, we could only pay £12 an hour, or whatever that looks like. But if we can add value in other ways, that's, I think, where we need to get to as a sector.
Yeah, I think a lot of people probably don't understand the cost associated to recruitment. So recruiting one individual costs a considerable amount of money, because quite often businesses in our space, and small businesses in general, really, they forget the fact that it takes time, and time is obviously a valuable asset for any small business, and they forget to put the monetary value on that time. So actually, I think when we talk to organisations and they talk about it could be the example you've given there with regards to having that kind of like welcome pack with the right gearing and spending a little bit more on that. Quite often people may forget that actually by spending a little bit more and making it more impactful actually is still way cheaper than the cost of recruiting one extra member for our team. So it's a headache. It's a headache for a lot of organisations, and I think it's almost like adapting what you do for your customers. I think a lot of people that we talk to will have a great customer journey experience mapped out, and they don't necessarily have that internally. So it's definitely a work in progress for a few organisations in our space that really need to do things differently, I think is what you're saying.
I think that word journey is key as well, because there is that journey of, I've joined an organisation, I'm coaching, I'm doing after school clubs. Where do I go from here? A lot of coaching companies have a very flat structure, load of coaching staff, maybe one operations regional person, owner. Where do I go? What's my next step? And that's, I think, one of the reasons why so many people are leaving, because they get to, I love what I'm doing. Well, what's the next step? Well, the next step is to do it myself. A bit like the fitness industry was 15 years ago, and still is to an extent now. We used to fill a load of people as fitness instructors in a gym, give them no real progression because there was only really one fitness manager. So what did they go and do? They went and got trained. They went and ran their own personal training business. And that progression is tough, unless you've got a really sizable organization where you've got those progressions. But, I was talking to someone a couple of weeks ago around how do we overcome that? Well, how do you encourage people to earn a bit more based on how good they are? A bit like I put a strategy in place years ago in group exercise classes. You get your £20 an hour, whatever that looks like. But actually, if you can retain more than 15 people in a class, I'll give you £1 extra for every person that you bring in to that, because you are ultimately responsible for that, because your good classes, your good quality of teaching will bring them back week on week on week. So the good ones that you want to keep, how do we encourage them by, making sure that they are intrinsically connected to the success of what they're doing?
Chris, a lot of our listeners are sports coaching companies predominantly. If you look outside of the sector, are there any other sectors that you think we can learn things from that can help us combat physical inactivity in children and young people?
I think there are a lot of organisations that in different sectors that are better at selling the why as opposed to the what. I guess an example would be Netflix or Nike, some of the big brands that they're not selling a commodity, they're selling the experience that sits with it. Nike don't sell shoes, we know that. They sell an experience. Netflix doesn't sell a subscription service. They sell an experience or a feeling that you get from just being able to switch on and consume what you want to consume. And I think that some of the top premium brands across multiple sectors do that well. The top watch companies, the top car companies, they're not selling a car, they're selling an experience. They're selling a feeling that you get from that. And I think, whether it's an after-school club, that you're not selling an after-school club to a school. I think we have to move away from, we're going in and would you like us to come and run your after-school club? No, that's everyone's doing that. What we're selling is an interactive, engaging, fun activity class to keep children healthy, to keep them enjoying potentially their first experience and first steps in physical activity. That's what you're selling. And I think websites, marketing, branding, I know that's a big thing that I bleat on around with my marketing hat on, is sell the why, not the what, because then I think we'll hook more people. And there are some great brands out there across multiple sectors, typically premium brands that you see everywhere. They don't sell the product; they sell the why. Why are we doing it? The experience that comes from the delivery of that commodity.
I think the marketing gets overlooked a lot in our sector. A lot of us come from that coaching background, like you described earlier. We're not experts a lot of the time in marketing, so I guess it's having that courage to invest in marketing. That could be investing in someone to support. It could be investing in someone else to come in from outside of the sector to help with that, and to, like you said, to promote the brand and the why rather than the thing itself.
Yeah, and I think there's two elements of that. There's the element of understanding the difference between brand and marketing, and there is the understanding that marketing is a set of tactics that sometimes you can justify an expense because you can get a return from it, whereas building a brand is very difficult to establish a return on investment for. But you've got to build a brand in order to ultimately market your business. And the differences between the two are key. How does your business talk on social media? How is your tone of voice to the kids different to your tone of voice to the parents, to your tone of voice to a head teacher when you're trying to sell a product or program into them? And typically within sports coaching organizations, they have one tone of voice, and the tone of voice is the business owner. And whatever their tone of voice is the tone of voice that is identical across the different audiences that they're trying to hit. And for me, helping an organization understand that it's the business that's talking, not the individual ways that sits behind the business, is absolutely crucial. And then once you've got that, and you've got a brand guide, and you've got a brand style in terms of tone of voice, look and feel, etc., then marketing becomes a hell of a lot more effective. But as you say, quite rightly, sometimes justifying the cost of doing that and understanding the medium to long-term benefits of it is tough when the climate is as it is and we're very short-termist in terms of cash flow and driving a profitable business.
Chris, you mentioned at the start about your experiences in the US, and we've not touched on that. So just at the back end of the pod, it'd be really interesting to hear what did that experience in a different culture, different climate, really kind of help you with today? Was marketing part of that?
Yeah, so I one of my first clients on the consultancy side back in 2010 was a coaching company called Challenger Sports, and they, at the time, and still probably are, the largest sports coaching company in the US. They would recruit 900 plus coaches. They deliver 3,000 camps a summer across the US. A huge engine in terms of what they were delivering. And ultimately, they were the first company that took football, soccer as they know it, to the US. So they took a sport that no one really knew about and used the US World Cup as a catalyst really to kind of drive that. So I was originally involved very heavily on the curriculum development and the training of coaches, and they used to recruit coaches in the UK and Brazil to fly out to the States and deliver those programs, like a football version of Camp America, ultimately. And I think the slight difference on football over there was it's classed as a middle-class sport, so therefore there was slightly more money in it than there would be in the UK. And that's very similar to Australia, very much seen as a middle-class sport in Australia and a couple of other countries as well. But I think, for me, the culture of sport and physical activity in the US is slightly different. Yes, there is the extremes. We know the US has the biggest obesity rates, not far, being followed by us. But the structure of sport and physical activity in schools and colleges and universities is much greater than over here. So there is a better investment, I think, in parents of kids that want to be involved in sport and physical activity. So I think for me, the appetite was definitely there. And there are organisations that are now really starting to find the right products for that market. very diverse in terms of the sports, from ice hockey all the way through to basketball and everything in between. They've got a lot, spread out sports, whereas in the UK, sport is probably half a dozen key sports, and that's where we sit. So branding wise, I think the US was probably behind the curve in building brands. It was much more around delivery. But ultimately, getting kids active is getting kids active. Doesn't matter what country, what language you speak. It's pretty much the same thing, from what I've seen.
A huge thanks to Chris, who shared some amazing insights during the episode, from adding value to the recruitment journey, the importance of a family feel at an organisation, no matter the size, and the headaches of rolling out a global service. If you'd like to connect with Chris, you can find him on LinkedIn at Chris Sharman and on Twitter at Topodium Group.
Join us next time for the Active Code podcast. Remember to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can connect with us on Twitter at aspire_partners and find out more about us and the network at www.aspireactivepartnerships.co.uk.